So this works? Okay, I'm sure Toby is super excited that I managed to get here in person this time, so he doesn't have to give my talk for me again, as entertaining as that was. So I'm going to talk to you about the BatBox project, which is a community citizen science project on a national scale. The first field season was in 2021, and this summer is the final field season for the project. We don't really have a catchy website, but if you just Google the name of the project, you're going to find lots of stuff. And I also produce a biannual newsletter as part of the project. This has updates and just general bat stuff for people that are interested. You don't have to be a participant to sign up for this. Just shoot me an email, and I'll add you to my giant email list. So this project is in partnership with CWF, Canadian Wildlife Federation, and Wildlife Conservation Society Canada. And some of the CWF folks are here today, and it's the first time we've met in person after years of collaboration, so that's super exciting. And I just want to start with acknowledgements, because this is a massive effort with a lot of co-authors. So of course, the CWF people have been instrumental in this. I've tried to list all the professional biologists that are involved in this project. I'm pretty sure I'm missing some. And then of course, there's a lot of organizations that are contributing. They're contributing data, they're contributing in-kind support, and of course, cash. We always like that. So a big thank you to all of these people. And of course, last but not least, a huge thank you to the hundreds of landowners that are contributing to this project. Obviously, it would not be possible without all of these people. So what are the goals of the project overall? We're trying to figure out the types and placement of bat boxes that people are putting out on the landscape, and which ones are the bats actually using. So part of this, of course, is documenting the microclimates in these bat boxes, because one of the concerns with bat boxes is the problem of them overheating. There wasn't a lot of data about that for Canada, and most of the current recommendations on bat box use that is available is based on research in the US and to some extent Europe as well. So we wanted a huge goal of this is to produce Canada-based or recommendations that are based on Canadian data, especially if there's going to be regional variations in that. And I just put these pictures up because I really like them. This is in New Brunswick in 2019, so post-white nose, but it is an active little brown bat maternity colony, so it was really fun to see that, and we actually caught a nursing mother and pup there, so that was always fun. So methods. To sign up for the project, what happens is landowners must already have bat boxes or plan to do so in the near future. We don't mail out bat boxes. That'd be insane at this scale. So one survey is a really long one, and they have to answer all these really detailed questions about the size of their bat box, the placement, all that good stuff. Second survey is for emergence counts. So when they're counting bats in their box, let's see if I can get that straight. They can fill out the survey even if they see no bats, so I can actually track how many bats they're seeing in these places. There also, a lot of people don't know, of course, what species they have in their boxes. So there's no way we can physically visit all these places to see for ourselves. So we get these landowners to collect guano samples, and then we can ID the bat species molecularly. We're also looking at if the white nose fungus is present in bat boxes. So we're trying to get citizen scientists to swab the inside of their bat boxes for the fungus. One of the problems with this, of course, is that these guys, nobody has rabies vaccinations, of course, why would you? So we can't have them swab the boxes when bats are present. So from a science perspective, it's not ideal, but we have to ask them to wait until bats leave for the season. So this is usually late summer, fall. So not the best, but this is what we have to work with. So the reason I did this at all is because there's a study done in New York that found the white nose fungus in bat boxes. So I wanted to see if we could get similar results here. Finally, of course, to document the microclimate in bat boxes, we're mailing out a ton of loggers, and I'll come back to that later, for the people to install themselves in their bat boxes. So for the loggers, we've got a lot of loggers out there, and what we do, we settled on using log tags here. So we're trying to keep this as simple as possible, because as landowners are installing them themselves. Again, at a national scale, there's no way we can go out and install them all ourselves, which of course, from a science perspective, would be ideal, because then we can ensure it's done properly. But it's just, logistically, it's just not possible. So we tried to keep this as simple as possible. So these look kind of like a credit card. It's a little thicker than that. And we also didn't want people to have to drill into their BOT boxes, like permanently damage their box. So we came up with this method of, we mail them the logger on a wire, so it's all assembled for them. To mail it, of course, it's all curled up, so it's really easy to pop in the mail. So people uncurl the wire, and then they can extend the logger up to the top of the BOT box and secure the wire with nuts and bolts at the bottom to hold it in place. So it's at the very top of the box. And we usually, depending on the size of the box, we'll send them more than one logger to try to document temperature variation within the boxes. So we had pretty good participation in this. Close to 1,400 people signed up. But of course, surprise, they don't all produce good data. So of that, about 800 has produced usable data. And when I say usable, like, it's still a very messy data set with a lot of missing information, which is, for a project like this, it's what you expect. It's what we have to work with. But it's still like a huge sample size here. And you can see the distribution of the participants across Canada. Again, no surprise, it's not even. It's concentrated in the major cities where humans are found. So, you know, humans up here, whatever. Southern Ontario, of course, very well represented compared to our one lonely site here in the Northwest Territories. At least we got one. So for occupancy, I have data on that for about 1,200 boxes. That's binary, yes, no. So about close to 40% are occupied, so that's pretty good. Of course, there's a lot of biases because people are signing up for this survey on their own, right? So it's not exactly all the BAT boxes in Canada, of course. And unfortunately, of those 1,200, I only have information on how many bats are in these boxes in 255. So a lot of missing data there, but at least we have something to work with. So when I'm categorizing these boxes by how many bats they have, I'm not using like day-to-day counts because that varies so much. What I do is I put these boxes into categories based on the maximum number of bats ever seen in that box or counted emerging from the box. So these are maximum numbers. And even with maximum numbers, you can see most of them have less than 10. So not huge colonies in these BAT boxes. So one of the points of doing this, of course, is trying to identify maternity colonies, which is kind of tough. So for these less than 10, like probably not. For the more than 11, now we're getting into maybe. So for instance, the photo I showed you earlier of the New Brunswick maternity colony, that actually falls into this category. So it is a maternity colony. But I also know of other colonies that fit into the same category that are not maternity colonies. So aside from the ones we can verify ourselves or by other professionals, most we can say here is that these might be maternity colonies, and these probably are. But anyway. Another thing I wanted to do with this is try to find out when bats are returning to BAT boxes and when they're leaving. So take this with a grain of salt, though, because most of this isn't based on systematic surveys by landowners. It's just when they happen to notice them. Some of them are pretty thorough, like really enthusiastic people. For instance, the Ontario one here, that person has really, really detailed data. She's super keen. She's near Niagara Falls with big brown bats in her BAT boxes. So most of them you see, though, are coming back usually early May, and they're staying way longer than I thought, actually. So they're staying into the fall. But this is a bit misleading. So the BAT boxes, in terms of occupancy, seem to sort of fall into 3 categories. So people have told me that they, across Canada, you have BAT boxes that are used in the early spring, and then the bats leave for the summer, like in May sometime, and they never see them again. The second category is BAT boxes that are used as maternity colonies. So you don't really see the bats until June, July, and sometimes they'll stay until the fall in those places, but everyone says like come late August, September, the numbers really drop off, and then you've just got stragglers. The third category is where they don't see bats, late August comes, the bats are there, which is kind of neat. So they see bats using these as transitory roosts in the spring and fall, and then the maternity colonies, of course, in the summer. So that was kind of neat. So in terms of what's important for occupancy in terms of bat design and placement, again, it's a very messy data set. I'm still going through the weeds on this, but some of the things that have popped out as being important is the year installed, so this is not surprising. The older the bat box, the more likely it's going to have bats. The number of boxes at the site, so some people have one box, some have 21. The 21 ones usually have more likely to have bats than the single box. What the box is attached to is important. So the trees have the worst occupancy rate. Poles are second. Best one, of course, wow, that really messed up, are the buildings. Wow, okay, we'll go with it. This is the building, in case that wasn't clear. Those were always the best in terms of occupancy, probably because of the thermal properties. The other variable that keeps popping out is, of course, in a lot of cases, people are installing bat boxes as part of their exclusion. So they're trying to get them out of the house. They're putting up bat boxes to try to compensate for the lack of habitat. So it's no surprise that those boxes usually have a better rate of occupancy because there's a bat colony right there. And they just go to the bat boxes sometimes, not always. So for the guano samples, we have about 80 samples pending, but we don't actually have any results yet. So I don't have a lot to say about this yet, unfortunately. We'll get there. Of course, there's a lot of roosts around the country that have been used by biologists for years, so we do have some where we know the species already. One of the downfalls of the guano sample thing is that the lab is only analyzing one pellet per box. So if it's a mixed species colony, we're not going to catch that. But I do have some confirmed mixed species colonies in bat boxes verified by professional biologists. So for example, Corey Olson in Alberta and Jared Clark in Saskatchewan. He's actually a bird biologist, but he did his master's with Mark Brigham, so that's good. For the swabbing results, we do have those back from the last summer. So we have the sample sizes here. They're not super high yet. We're really trying to push this summer. So if anyone's interested in swabbing occupied bat boxes around, please get in touch, because I really want to increase the sample sizes of this. So here's the year where the swabbing was done, province, the months the swabbing was done. And you can see that everything's negative until you get to the Maritimes, and that's where it gets interesting. And that's where, in Canada, where white nose has been the longest as well, except maybe for Ontario. We can talk about that. So PEI, we had an inconclusive in July. We had 2 positives in May in Nova Scotia. And then everything else was inconclusive so in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. So we are getting more inconclusives, positives in the spring. That is the best time to survey for this. But again, if we're having citizen scientists do this, it's just not possible. Wow, I need to speed up. Okay, I'm just gonna go. So detecting it by PCR molecularly doesn't tell you anything about the viability of the fungus. If it's just dead DNA, we don't really care. If it's actually viable and able to cause disease, then we care. So that's something I need to do, I'm going to try to do this spring, right here at McMaster actually with JP. I'll be swabbing bat boxes and trying to culture the fungus on agar. Loggers, we have a lot of loggers. Bailey's had a super fun month trying to program them all and ship them all across Canada. About half of these go through the CWF national office, so she's responsible for half of that, and the rest is by a bunch of other people. So our initial conclusions from that, the top of the box is hotter than the bottom, surprise. For overheating, we definitely documented a lot of overheating events across Canada, including temperatures over 50 degrees. So the front chamber is hotter than the back chamber. Again, not really surprising if you're exposed to sun. Black, hotter. No vents, hotter. On the pole, way more likely to overheat than the buildings and trees. And multiple participants across the country reported bats bulging out of their boxes. That's a sign of heat stress, that they are overheating. But overall, occupied boxes are warmer than unoccupied. So warm is good up to a point. One thing this is my final one. One thing I just wanted to mention quickly is it did it again. A sort of side project that came out of this is people sometimes report odd roosts for bats to me as part of this project. So it's kind of come into this whole side project that Laurie Finney in Nova Scotia is writing up. So if you have any records about bats roosting in umbrellas or any really weird places during the summer, please contact me. I did contact the rehab people about this, and one of you got back to me and one of you didn't. So I'll be writing after you later. Yeah, if you have any data to share with this, that'd be great. And something else with this project is we're trying to collate the bits and pieces of unpublished data related to bat boxes across the country, because a lot of people have, tucked away in their back drawers, data that they have about bat boxes that have never been published. So part of this is really trying to get everyone together to get a cohesive national picture of what's going on with bat boxes in Canada. And I'm done. I'm done.
Anybody have any questions?
Yes.
I was curious about your loggers, because I couldn't quite exactly figure out. Are they measuring the temperature of the exterior of the bathhouse?
No, so they're tucked in. That was for illustrative purposes. They're threaded. The loggers are threaded up into the bat box, so they're inside the bat box. Yeah, I can see how that was confusing there. Yeah.
So which part?
The wire or
The whole thing. It's threaded up, so you get the logger inside the box at the very top, or in the front, or at the bottom.
How is the wire, I'm confused, how is the wire related? So the credit card thing is just
The logger itself, and we attach a wire that we just get from the hardware store. It's a stiff wire
what's the wire for?
to keep it up in the top of the bat box. Because how else would you mount it inside the bat box?
Karen, we need you to repeat the question if you can, please.
What was the question? I've forgotten already.
Are you measuring?
How exactly are you deploying the loggers?
How I'm deploying the loggers, yes. Using the wire to thread it up, you thread it into the chamber, up into the top of the bat box, so the logger is sitting inside the box at the top, and it's supported by the wire, which is nailed into the bottom, the landing pad usually, of the bat box, so the wire stays in place.
So the sensor is located on the logger, not the wires that have nothing to do with the sensor?
No. The wire has nothing to do with the sensors on the logger. It's something we added for deployment. And if the picture hadn't mysteriously rotated, you would see that Parks Canada and some of the provincial parks have a slightly different system where they attach the loggers to a thin piece of wood. And it's kind of nice actually, because you have this piece of wood, let's say my arm here is the wood, they have the logger at the top and the logger at the bottom, all both ratcheted into the same piece of wood. And then you can just install the whole thing in there. It's kind of nice actually.
Time for one more question.
Come on.
You probably know this. But how are you dealing with the occupied boxes being warmer than unoccupied boxes? Saying that warmer boxes are preferred, but if more bats are in a box, it's going to be warmer anyway.
Yes, no, that is a concern. So for yeah, so the presence of bats in the box is going to naturally increase the temperature for sure. And for professional biologists, one thing they do actually when they deploy these loggers is sometimes they'll put a sort of cage around it so that the bats aren't like snuggling up to the logger and messing with your data. But with a project like this, with non-professionals doing it on a national scale, like we had to keep this as simple as possible, and that just wasn't in the cards. And certainly participants have reported bats snuggling up to our loggers. So that it's a problem. It is what it is. There's not really much I can do about it.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Karen.